What is going on, Secondhand Talent family? Here we are at the end of season 5, episode 99. And all I have to say is thank you so much to everybody tuning in for the first time, for the 5th time, for the 10th time, for the 99th time. We would not be here without you, and we are looking forward to episode 100. Thank you all so much. It's been an incredible journey, and it would not be possible without all of you by our side. Thank you again to Luke Chu for the Lo-Fi, the toy of the season, and for Tenacious Toys for the desk candy, as always. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, you'll notice there's a lot of stuff hovering all around me that isn't usually here, and that's because our guest, all the way back from episode 10 in season 1, rock poster artist and author of Visual Feast, the tantalizing artwork of Justin Hampton, the man himself, Justin Hampton. Justin, welcome back to the show.
Good to be back. How's it going? That is crazy that you've had 99 episodes so far. That is amazing. You've come a long way since episode 10.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You know, it really, in the build up to this interview, as I was reading through the book and, reacquainting myself with the old interviews just to make sure I don't double, ask anything I asked in the past. I remember the feeling I had when you agreed to be on the show. And the way that interview turned out I was magnificent, and to be featured in the Kickstarter email for the book that we're about to talk about now, 88 or 89 episodes later, to me is just so absolutely special. So in light of that, rather than ask what does Secondhand Talent mean to you had you never heard it before, since you've already been on the show, my question to you is, over the last 2.5 years, from your vantage point, since you've been a guest on the show, several colleagues of yours have been on the show, and it's been really gratifying to be able to have these conversations. I'm just really curious, what's your perspective been of the show as it's passed since your appearance last?
Well, I mean, you've definitely gotten it dialed a lot more. And I like the fact that what you do is so incredibly DIY. And, you're a fan. You're a fan of pop culture. You're a fan of all of these people that you interview. I think some of the best interviews come from people that know, what they're talking about because they actually love it. You know what I mean? So I think that's amazing. I think people respond to that because, they feel like they're a part of it, just like you are. You know what I mean? You're speaking for them in a sense. You know what I mean? And, to a large degree, everyone that's creative is a fan of some sort. You know what I mean? We all started as nerds of whatever our, interests were, and pursued that passion. You know what I mean? So I think you're tapping the pulse of the zeitgeist, as it were.
Oh, I really appreciate that. And it's really interesting to kind of hear that descriptor about myself, because so often when I describe Secondhand Talent to other people, one of the things that I say quite frequently to anybody who I've ever talked about the show, you've heard me say this, the goal is to shine the light not just on the folks who we interview, but all of the people who occupy those spaces, because for every one poster artist or light director or sound engineer or independent venue owner that I interview, there's dozens, if not hundreds more out there who deserve the same respect and recognition and thanks for all their hard work. And it's just really nice to hear that it's being received as the way it was intended. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
But without further ado, let's start eating. I'm hungry. So, folks, full disclosure here. Justin mentioned being a fan and, in and around the culture. And, I'm a nerd at heart. I am a collector. I've been collecting a lot of things for a long time. It wasn't until recently, though, that I realized that Justin actually illustrated the Magic the Gathering card set, at least a few cards in it, the Ice Age 2 set that I played with when I was a kid.
A long time ago. Yep.
Then I happened in my comic book collection a copy of Twitch, which I've had since I was a teenager.
Very cool.
And as an adult, teenager and young adult, and now full on adult, um, I've, increasingly been a fan of your work, and I love books.
Mhm. Same.
And I always, reading Emmek's book and going through that was such an adventure. Same with Luke Chu. I have Promises from JR, which is little but powerful.
Right.
And it was really just such a treat to finally get my hands on this. And I really wanted to wait until I had it in hand.
Right.
Before we actually dive into the book itself, folks, you see over here, I got the oversized version because, of course, I did, because I'm a collector nerd. We've established that. We'll move past it. But I got
A
the
limited edition.
the limited edition of
Yep.
1,000 with
Yep.
the slipcase and the cover art. We will talk a lot about that in a little bit. And of course, the full book, which is full of notes over there. And I really do need to say this or ask this before we begin, even though I've talked a lot already. Even though you've been involved in art in one way or another for over 3 decades,
Right.
publishing a book is a beast of its own. As someone who
Mhm.
comes from a background of literature, that bridge is really it's beautiful when it is crossed, but
Right.
to really make that crossing, you need to build the bridge yourself. What
Mhm.
was it like, not only deciding to create a book, but what was the actual like process? Because I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, a book, but it's not really as easy as folks
No,
think.
not at all. Well, I mean, it's a good question, number one. And number two, talk about a daunting task. I mean, seriously, like, there's the idea of doing a book, which, I've had people for the last 20 years asking me to do a book. And I think part of me waiting so long was I just didn't think I had enough. When I was younger, I would look at big volume art books and think, that would be cool, but I couldn't imagine having that much work to fill a book. You know what I mean? Let alone just actually having that much experience to make it interesting book. You know what I mean? So that was part of it, and then also I think what started the process in my brain of thinking about doing a book was I had been sharing so many stories on Facebook and Instagram that when the idea kind of clicked that maybe I should start thinking about this, was I've got so many individual stories that I put on Facebook, and the people that follow me are getting them and reading them and getting something out of it. But then they're kind of lost in the ether of the internet. You know what I mean? Or even with your followers, because it just fades away on the page and there it's gone. It's behind you now, unless it comes up in a memory and you decide to push that out again. Hey, check out what I said. That's kind of narcissistic. Look at what I said again.
You
so,
know, I just real quick, I mean, maybe narcissistic, but one of your friends and colleagues who I also admire greatly, Mr. Jermaine Rogers, I'm always grateful when he bumps those memories of those musings, because, and I'm, guilty of being one of those people who's been wanting him to write a book for a real long
oh
time.
yeah, for sure.
But I just think, I think some of the things that he writes are just so beautiful,
Mhm.
and I really do love it when he bumps those things up, because they
Cool.
aren't anywhere else.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. That's kind of like how I was just recently explaining to someone how back in the day when I saw Alice in Chains back in the Central Tavern, in one of the small clubs they used to play before they got signed, how going to their show was the only way you could hear their music because they hadn't been recorded yet. So from going to the shows and hearing the songs, and you got to know the songs from going different times, you would literally want to go see them again to hear that one song that you can't hear anywhere else but the show, you know. So that's kind of how I feel about this too, in the sense of like, you know, it was just time to collect it all. And the cool thing with that was I could go back in Facebook literally and do a self search and find some of those stories. And I had rough drafts for a lot of different stories that I had just published on Facebook. So that's kind of where, when I got the idea of like, you know what, I'm going to do this book, the thing that kind of moved me forward in that thought process was like, well, I've already started with all these stories I've told on Facebook. So I can just go back and, you know, copy those and then expand and build on those. So that was like, okay, now this is tangible. Now I can understand that part. The next part was just like, holy shit, where do I start? Because it's, you know, 35 years of work and experiences. And I just remember having this like metaphoric vision of like standing at the base of Mount Everest and just looking up, going like, how do I get there? You know what I mean?
Mm.
Holy crap, this is just so massive, you know? And so
You
initially
know,
I was just like, well, let me just start at the beginning. That's semi-chronological. It gives me a place to start.
we're going
And
off
that's what
of
I've done.
your going off of your metaphor of Everest, or, you know, summiting any mountain. You know, the goal is always obvious, right? You want to reach the peak, right?
Right.
The question is not just which path do you take to get there, but what's your process, right? Because some
Mhm.
paths might seem longer, but if you do it the right way, could take you
Right.
faster. Others have pitfalls, you know, like
Right.
it's not just about like, yes, okay, the goal is publishing a book, but I think it's very important to emphasize that kind of like where to start, you know, thing,
Mhm.
because yes, it's very easy to say begin at the beginning, but
Right.
you know, as you know, from your previous interview on this show, you know, the beginning is a lot more nuanced than just creating your first poster. That's
Right.
not the beginning.
Right. Yeah, truly. Yeah, at all. So I basically started the year I moved to Seattle, you know, told a little bit about my upbringing, you know, where I came from, but then I just moved directly into, you know, arriving in Seattle in the late summer of 1987. And, uh, and I just, and then also I knew beyond what the beginning was going to be, I was going to break it down into categories, which were going to be, you know, the early days, which would include the Rocket magazine, getting started doing illustrations for a rock tabloid, and then some of the comic book work, and then eventually move into posters, illustration, include logos, but also throwing in stories and sketches. And it just kind of like, as I began building it, it started kind of unfolding really naturally. And then, you know, pretty soon I had 50 pages behind me, and I was like, oh, wow, look, I'm like, you know, Mount Everest metaphor again. I'm a few hundred feet up. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Look, it's not so far. Well, it's really far ahead, but look how far I've come. And I just kept going, you know. And my idea initially was that I would write it, at least the majority of it, before seeking out a publisher. Because the more I had, I mean, I know that a lot of pitches are just like, I'm a rock poster artist. Here's some posters. Here's what I do. This is my idea. This is how many pages. But I was like, that's not going to hook anybody. I need, I think it was more for me. Like, I just need to start working on this to know that I'm committed and I've done enough to merit something special. It's not just another, because, you know, if you pitch that to a publisher, they're going to be like, oh, we'll give you a picture book. You get 100 pages. You know, we're going to make it 9 by 12. Don't make it any bigger. We don't want to spend that kind of money. You know what I mean? I literally had an offer early on from a publisher for that kind of thing. And I was like, that's not what I want. I want a full career retrospective, you know?
You know,
So,
if you're gonna, I feel like it, you know, I say all the time, you know, better to whole ass one thing than half ass two things. And, you
right,
know, if you're gonna do it, do it. Like,
totally.
do
Yeah,
it right and do it the way you want. And I think that's a perfect segue for us to jump right into it. So I'm going to reach back
nice.
and grab my copy here.
Cool. Hang on tight. You know it's heavy.
Oh, I know. Folks at home, if you're not
Get your little
listening,
workout.
if you're just listening or reading and you're not watching on YouTube, I've been practicing that maneuver of swinging the book over the mic. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, man. I have put in rounds like I've been training for like the podcast Olympics. Yeah. It's
It's
really,
like Thor's hammer. It's the book itself is 9 pounds.
it's nine
That's
pounds
yeah.
and it's so cool. Like
Right.
I'm just a big fan of like the slight lacquering and you know and that just the inside cover, you know, the flaming skull, an iconic image of yours, and just a clean opening, and thank you again. But and you know, you mentioned something before about 99 episodes, and I was revisiting your inscription, and as you were talking about beginning at the beginning, I was kind of, you know, I've been asking myself a lot, how did I get to 99 episodes? You know,
Yeah.
over 100, including the handful that haven't aired. But I've been asking myself that a lot, and the answer, similar to yours, is just, you know, figuring out where to start,
Right.
knowing kind of the the path that goes up the mountain. There
Hmm.
will be pitfalls along the way. I'll have to learn things. I'll have to learn new skills. I'll have to
Right.
adapt. But, you know, and my book is still being written. And
Right.
yours really is too. I mean,
Oh
this
yeah.
is as much as it is a comprehensive book, it is still a snapshot, and
Hmm.
it is still up until a certain
Right.
point. You know, you're still
Exactly.
very much active in
Oh
what
yeah.
you do.
And I've
So
already got 3 or 4 or more new designs, that I wasn't able to put in there because I had to go to press. And then, future projects are already in the process. So, it's definitely up until whatever it was, January of this year or something like that.
yeah, actually, I was actually quite impressed with how close to recent you got with the publication. I mean, you really pushed the
Yeah.
boundaries of what I can. By the time I got to the end of, I was like, surely it must be ending at some point, and it just it was like December 2024. What is the and it? I mean,
Yeah.
really an impressive feat understanding
Thanks.
the the deadlines of publication for books,
Mhm.
you know, and having been through that.
Right.
Not at this scale, but you know, starting out the conversation though, you know, this book, and we spoke about this a little bit in our previous discussion, but this book starts out with a portrait that you did and a posthumous forward by your dearly departed friend Mark Lanigan, and I just wanted you to let take a moment to reflect on, you know, just like the great, not just musician, the great person Mark was and the friend he
Yeah.
was, and the reason that his words meant so much to you that it
Oh
was
yeah,
worth
for
putting this
sure.
at the beginning. I think it's worth it.
Definitely. Well, I mean, I was just talking to another friend on Facebook earlier, like literally right before I started talking to you, talking about Lanigan's music. And it's been a constant conversation of mine since I first heard Screaming Trees back in the day. I mean, like I said, I moved to Seattle in '87. I discovered Screaming Trees by '88 and was actively buying all their albums up until a point by '89. I think I'd caught up with their whole catalog at that point. You know what I mean? And I saw them for the very first time in late '89 on the eve of my 21st birthday, which is pretty crazy. It was an amazing show. Soundgarden, Screaming Trees, and Tag. And so he's literally been a part of my life soundtrack since I was like 20 years old. That's crazy, you know.
Wow.
And and so there was all these like kind of serendipitous interweaving of our lives in the sense of like, we both moved to Seattle in '87, you know, we both went to Seattle to, make something of ourselves, quote unquote. Um, him with his band, me with my art. I was doing stuff for the Rocket magazine. He was doing music that was being covered by the Rocket magazine. Seattle was so much smaller back then. I mean, it was like a small town city. It was more similar to how Portland was about 10 years ago. Really, really intimate. Everyone that was in the scene knew that something cool was happening, but it wasn't on a national level. It was locally. It was kind of like we all knew it was awesome, but we knew that the greater world had no clue, except for some of the little indie zines that were making it out into the world. And so, you know, I worked at a coffee shop that Lanigan's girlfriend worked at. I had never met him at that point, but I had her show him some of my artwork, and he ended up passing on it back then. But Mark always claimed that he didn't remember much of the '90s, which I'm sure is true. He did a fair amount of drugs back in the day, and but we had this weird interwoven thing going on. My brother dated an ex of his at one point. But anyway, so we eventually met in '98 when I did my first poster for him at the Showbox. And like I said, Mark as a musician, Mark as a writer, as a poet, I mean, his lyrics to me are so phenomenal. They're so visceral and visual. So when I finally got a chance to create work for him, it was just such a joy, such a pleasure, because every single line of his lyrics would just light up my imagination. You know what I mean? And so to actually become friends with him and work with him after already having this great reverence for the man was really cool. It was very special, very, kind of pinch yourself, not in the sense of like, oh my God, I'm doing something for intern name here, one of the biggest bands in the world. Mark was never in one of the biggest bands in the world. He was more of kind of the low flying, Nick Drake, Nick Cave back in the day. You had to know about him to know about him. You know what I mean? He was never that ultra superstar, like I insert any name here, Madonna, Billie Eilish, whatever. He never was that. Obviously those are women, but even still, like that kind of like, major pop icon in that sense. He was somebody I had to search for.
I just wanted to highlight two quick quotes here from the foreword. Cool. First is, it was a blast when we embarked on what was to become a nearly 2-year tour for the record Songs for the Deaf. I was delighted to find out Justin had been commissioned with a couple of other popular artists to create posters for every single gig of a long tour of the U.S. The first time in history, in rock and roll history, that for every single show, there was an original print done by either Justin, Jermaine Rogers, or Emick. And then I just want to fast forward again here to the end. Over time, our bond deepened to the point where now both of us men have a partnership where Justin creates a poster for every tour I do, as well as t-shirt designs, candle designs, anything I think I can sell. He puts an amazing piece of artwork on it, and I have made a pretty good living around the world with the help of that other small town kid from the Northwest, now my close friend and indispensable ally. And those are the words of thanks, but also of a true friend.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's really powerful.
The next line or two is the one that really hits me, because he says, go ahead and read it, because it really is still kind of almost brings me to
I wanted to read it, but yes, it's really quite something. Mark finishes the introduction with this. He has that rare quality of true greatness at his chosen craft, and his body of work is unparalleled in the field of poster art. He is among the very greats, the Frank Kozicks, the Emmicks, Reese Coopers, Jermaine Rogerses, etc. The work of Justin Hampton stands shoulder to shoulder with that of the best. I am proud to call this great, supremely talented man my friend, And as long as I make music, you can be sure he will make the artwork to go along with it.
Yeah, that's the part that gets me right there. And so, I mean, obviously, it's all amazing. You know what I mean? What a sweetheart. What a great friend. What a great ally. But as long as I'm making music, he'll do my artwork kind of thing. That's tough. You know what I mean? Because I know that was true. I know that, he had different artists that came to him, and I'd heard even through other artists. It was like, hey, I'd love to do something for you. And he'd say, sorry, Hampton's my guy. So yeah, he just had that kind of loyalty. And the art stopped when the music stopped, and that line still gets me. Sometimes if I chance upon that when I open the book, because sometimes I just look through it just because, like, holy shit, I did this. When I chance upon that line, sometimes it can give me a good tear down my face because, that's exactly how it went. The only reason the art stopped is because the music stopped.
And I would be remiss to mention that the other 4 artists who provided introductions are the other 2 members of Post Neo Explosionism, Jermaine Rogers and Emmett, as well as Ward Sutton and Shepard Fairey, 4 just absolute legends in the field. I think, in my opinion, and tell me if I'm wrong, the other side of the coin as far as inspiration for this book goes, someone who had an interesting juxtaposition initially with Mark, your brother Blue.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not know last time we spoke just how deep the influence, and there's a whole chapter on it that we'll get to later. But I did not realize at the time when we spoke just how deep that connection was with your brother.
Yeah.
That was new information to me, and I think it's extraordinary to juxtapose that with I mean, folks know the 5 names we just listed, but folks might not know your brother's name. And to put him right up there in that pantheon, I figure we should also give a minute to talk about his impact.
For those that don't know, it's my late brother. He passed 10 years ago. He was a giant among men. Literally, he was 6'7". I'm 6 foot. He was always that same height difference of us from kids all the way to adulthood. And he was a very large presence in all the ways. He could light up a room. He was very gregarious. He was very silly. He liked to make people laugh. But he was also this big, imposing guy, But he came to Seattle after he had left Eugene, Oregon. He was studying to be an actor, and he had been in a bunch of very big plays at that point, and he just kind of got disillusioned with it, and he realized as a guy that's 6'7", he was going to be typecast. And even though there'd be great roles for that typecasting, you know what I mean, because he was a really good actor.
It's still a box.
He didn't want to be in the box, and so he came to Seattle after I told him how amazing it was and all these shows I was saying. I kept sending him little, albums and like, you got to check out this band that's from here. They're phenomenal. So he moved up in '89 and or late '88, late '88, and he started attempting to play music. He was really horrible when he started. It really was. He was terrible. Like, I was kind of just like, dude, is music really your thing, bro? He, of course, fuck you, dude. I was like, just saying, we were always very honest with each other to the tune of being,
don't kill the messenger. I'm the oldest of 6. I get it. Trust me.
Yeah. Or you can try to kill me, but good luck, but he kept at it. And he surrounded himself with people that were really good, and he started hauling equipment for other bands that were doing stuff and learning from them and sitting in on jams. And it's crazy. He got really good at playing bass, and he started playing in bands, and they were really great bands. None of them turned into big record contracts. I did get one of them, like I started kind of managing them just because I was like, look, I know everyone in town from doing posters. I know all the bookers, let me just get you guys shows. And then it was like, well, shit, if I'm doing this, I guess we might as well call me manager. They called me the minister of propaganda because I did the logos and the flyers and, and, so, so it was a really cool, synonymous kind of like, brotherhood that we had because I'd always talk about his bands to people and promote them, and he would always talk about my art with people and promote me. So people would at first not think we were brothers. They'd be like, "Get the fuck out of here! You're not brothers. Like you guys don't look anything like." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. I'm 6 foot. I have straight hair. I have all of, well, I guess, okay, what am I trying to say? Hazel eyes. Um, he's this like tall giant with like curly hair and blue eyes. And we were the opposite ends of the gene pool of our mom and dad. And so, people would be like, show me your ID. I don't believe you. And I'm just like, dude, I'm not going to show you my fucking ID. But, we're brothers, whatever, get over it, And so, but we always promoted each other. So, when he passed away, and there was this period around 2015 where I really started thinking about like, I want to tell the tale. And part of the tale was I wanted to give him his last moment in the sun, his final curtain call, to have one more time on the big stage. And so, yeah, I added 10 pages, a whole chapter dedicated to him and his bands and the work that I did with them. So I knew he was always proud of me. I knew he always talked me up, and it was my turn to do the same in a big way. So I just, it just made sense. And it was cathartic to add that, homage to my brother like that, because we were best of friends, always there together. We went to so many shows together back in the day and had so much fun.
Well, I can't imagine. It doesn't matter how much time has passed, that those kinds of losses stick with you forever. But it is beautiful to be able to give that tribute, and I'm grateful you're able to give this time. And I love that you start the book with this full 2-page spread of this iconic photograph, pointing out where you and Blue are in the crowd. Like it's just a really incredibly touching way. Not, you do add it later, but you also, there's a solid chunk at the beginning about it. And as someone with 4 brothers, I mean, I can't imagine, God forbid, any of them are gone anytime soon. I couldn't imagine it. And, it's gotta stay with you, but
yeah, I would just say that, death is one of those things that, it eventually affects everyone. I mean, it's something that, it's like the great, leveler of the playing field for everyone because we're all affected. Some people are affected when they're younger and it comes a lot sooner than you expect. Some people, doesn't come till much later in life. But I would say that, the edges of the pain eventually round out and get a little duller, and you get over the agony of it. But it's just it just becomes the missing of the person, as well as just the remembering the good things. You know what I mean? That's kind of what comes, so.
And, having the opportunity to publish those things. I mean, for the world to see what a light, Blue was, I think that's a really, what a tribute to a wonderful person gone too soon. And I, again, just to put a cap on it, think it's just a wonderful tribute to have him, at the beginning and in the book with his own special influence. But moving on into the early stages of your career, I was noticing. So I know that these Magic the Gathering cards here that I referenced earlier and this comic book came out in the same year. And I did notice that a lot of your student work does include a lot of these comic books, especially a full page spread on Twitch, which I absolutely love. And folks, if you can find a copy, please get it. All of Justin's comics are super quiet. So the two samples of work we have here are a front page of a DC Batman comic, and then we have a Who poster. Obviously,
which is technically my very first rock poster as a
there's
student work. Yeah.
there's a little nugget for you folks.
And then the
So
interesting thing is 30 some years later, I do an official Who poster.
in which I have, which I love with the motorcycle. I love.
So it comes full circle all the way around.
So badass. Like episode 10 to 99. It's crazy.
Exactly. Yeah.
But no, not to discount the student work at all with regards to the concert work. Just to say that it's very clear that the direction that you had was kind of like, all right, like this is formative and iconic of what I want to step into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was very much influenced by comic book stuff back in the day, and it still shows in my work.
Were there any comics in particular that really, I mean, there's certainly ones that you reference, in different works of yours, but are there any comics in particular that were really meaningful to you as far as artistic inspiration?
I mean, there was so many in the sense of like, I was a kid in a small town, and comic books was kind of like a window to another realm, they're just like TV and going to movies, but, comic books were 25 cents or whatever when I was a kid. So they were super easily accessible and just kind of, it was my earliest experience of like, oh, I want to do this. I want to copy these pictures and see if I can mimic this. And so it started with that. So, I mean, I would say Spider-Man was huge, honestly, X-Men. There was lots of the mainstream ones. As I became older, I got more into the indie comic books, Fantagraphics, and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was a huge influence for sure. That and album art and skate art, that kind of stuff. So yeah, my dog is vying for my attention right now, so he'll leave me alone again.
no worries.
Come here, let's say hi. Come here, next up. Come here. Here's my circus bear. Come here, buddy.
All right.
Here's my circus bear dog. Hey, what you doing?
How dare you? I got boy. Oh, that's a boy.
He's a good boy. Okay, go in there, buddy. Go on.
So, what's interesting about your comics, though, and I hear the inspiration, from Marvel, and personally, I'm a DC person, but when I got older, I moved on to Icon and Image and Dark Horse and Vertigo.
Right.
Those were all the labels that I actually paid attention to as I actually got into more comics. So, different, same page, different playbook. But
I liked Batman a lot as a kid too. So to be fair,
Green Lantern's my
Green Lantern's for sure. Oh, yeah.
I've got on the other side of this, I've actually got Green Lantern and Superman: Legend of the Green Flame, which is
Did you see the new Superman yet?
No, not yet. No spoilers.
Go see it. It's good.
Okay, we'll do. But back to the comic books. What's fascinating to me about your stories is that actually, in the vein of Spider-Man, written originally by the creator Stan Lee, you not only did all the parts, you wrote the stories.
True. Yeah.
So, I mean, what's that like? I mean, because I loved comic books growing up, but I became a comedian because I'm fumble fingers. And like I couldn't draw or play, so I started telling jokes about it. And but I've always loved stories. And one thing I love about your comic books is that they're total stories in the sense that it's not just the narrative and the words, all of the art it's all by you. What's it like to create because we dug into the process of each comic last time, but what's it like to have all that creative control over a comic book under your name?
Well, I mean, to be fair, I only did a few comic books. I was a comic book inker for a while, where I just inked someone else's pencils, and then I did coloring, where I colored someone else's pencils and inks, and then I decided it would be fun to do some myself, and so I wrote and drew uh, two comic books of my own, and then contributed to some other people who wrote them. Specifically, Denny Eichhorn for his autobio, super crazed stoner drug dealing stories from the road called Real Stuff. Those kind of books, and those were amazing. It was like Hunter S. Thompson meets, like, I don't know, Charles Bukowski or something. Amazing, so much fun. And what a great character he was. He was such a cool guy. Those were my very first published, fully drawn stories in a comic book, which were Denny Eichhorn and Real Stuff. But after doing those, I always had ideas in my head for stories, and I was like, I should do my own comic book. So that's what Twitch was. I did an anthology of short stories. I think it's 4 different stories, and each in a different style. I mean, and a lot of people say that about my poster too. They're like, "Why you have so many different stylistic approaches?" And that's what I did with the comic book too, because I'm an artist. I don't like just doing one approach. I like to come up with a different approach for whatever's the project is, whatever's in front of me. So I think I'd get bored if I didn't.
Those are always comics that I've been drawn to personally as a fan of one shots. Like, I love one shots. I love, single issue, it's a self-contained story, or it's like multiple sections that are clearly divided. Like, I think there's an understated level of execution in that, because it's easy to start a story. It's not as easy to end it.
True. And speaking of which, there's the perfect segue to my next one, which was titled Rat, which was written as a 3-part miniseries, and only the first one was ever published. So it was the never-ending cliffhanger.
So that's kind of like the Miracle Man saga. I think Bronze Age got canned. So I mean, is there any chance that maybe in a part 2 we would ever see Rat 2 and 3?
Rat 2 and 3 are completely written. Rat 2 was completely thumbnailed out, and you got to understand this happened when the comic market crashed in 1987. So my timing was impeccable, of course. So, so I put all this time and effort into this thing, and then the comic market crashed. And so I was co-publishing it with a publisher who was very hesitant to publish it by himself because of the comic market. And so I agreed to co-publish it, financing half of it. And after the first issue, even though it sold very well for an indie comic, I think it sold like 3,000 copies. He was like, I just can't justify this. I gotta cut back. So I'm gonna, bow out. But I encourage you to do it. And I was like, yeah, well, I'm gonna have to bow out too, because I'm not in the position to do this by myself at this point.
Literally made this comic book fall off my table. Like, yeah, I'd love to do it. Fucking true. Sure. Like, yes, we'd all love to do it. There's a reason you and I are having this conversation, though.
Exactly. Well, and the interesting thing is things have changed so much since then. Yeah. Because now there's crowdfunding. Now you can do a Kickstarter, or there's a number of outlets to do this kind of thing. So it could technically be done. Sorry, I'm getting my cord plugged in here so I don't die while I'm talking to you.
It's Justin. It's still secondhand talent, man. Like we're all good. Don't even worry about it, man.
Keeping it real.
I gotta ask, because it does seem, and that really helps me frame kind of the next segue, because I was wondering, when I think of comic books, and like series that I really started to follow, they actually all started right around that time. I'm talking about, Alan Moore's saga of the Swamp Thing. Neil Gaiman's Sandman, there were a lot. Grant Morrison was doing a whole bunch of things. There were a lot of things. There's a lot of comics that I love. I think Sandman started in '89.
Right.
And so it's really interesting to hear, it's this like little like gap period where you found yourself. And
Right.
was it a natural segue then because you were already coloring and inking was it a lateral move to a newspaper to start doing tabloid inking and things like that? Or was there a pause in between?
I think, I mean, here's the thing. And I read about this in the book. At age 14, growing up in at least 10 years from age 8 to 18, I lived in Medford, Oregon. So it was a very small town, lumber town, back then a very sleepy town. And I really wanted to get out. So from age 14, I was just driven. I had been copying comic books for years, and the Marvel Tryout book had just come out, and it was this book that you could literally try each form, of the medium from writing to penciling to inking. And I just started sending in samples to try to get work, And I think we talked about this in the last one.
We did touch on it a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, by the time I realized when I graduated high school that it wasn't going to happen, and I wasn't going to be able to leave Medford anytime soon if I didn't do something else. So I decided to go to art school, and that's what brought me to Seattle. So I brought that background of being able to do these things with me, went to art school for 2 years, graduated in '90. And I still my interest was there. So I'd go to comic conventions, I'd meet people, I'd talk to people. And so I started pursuing doing that as a potential, venue to do and for work. But then I also was like, well, I'm an illustrator, so I can do stuff for the local magazines. So I did that. I mean, I feel like my early career especially, but it still kind of holds true today, is I'm an artist. I can do lots of different things. I can paint, I can draw, I can design logos, I can do posters, I can do illustration, so there's all these different, why limit yourself to one thing if you can do all these different things, it's all under the greater umbrella of art. So like the crazy thing is the year you're talking about, 1984, I put on Twitch, I did my first magic work, I did my first rock poster, and I was doing stuff for the Rocket. So I had my hands in all these different facets of artwork, but they were all different genres. One was fantasy, one was comic book, one was rock posters.
Is that the reason? Because I feel like, and maybe I missed it, but I feel like the Magic the Gathering stuff wasn't really in the book as much.
It's not in the book at all.
Yeah.
In
Okay.
fact,
Thank you.
it was a conscious decision. Yeah.
Okay. I'm not crazy. All right.
True.
Because
only slightly.
Okay, because I was reading through it, and I've got these couple of cards here, and
Right.
I remember when I was prepping for our interview a couple of years ago, I when I had that realization, and I was like, holy shit, I've been a fan of this guy since I was like 7. Like when I was playing this set that's here next to me. And I was looking forward actually to reading that in the book, and I remember vaguely there being some sort of there was an issue with the art of Magic the Gathering and AI and all that, and I don't know if that has anything to do with or what the deal is, but I'm quite curious because I was genuinely looking forward to reading about that.
Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is the book is 444 pages. It's a 10-pound book with the slipcase. So I was like, if I add that stuff, it's going to make it over 500 pages.
Good start.
So it's already 10 pounds. I'm like, at some point, I got to, kind of relegate things to other places and trim it down a bit. So, and then I also kind of realized that, there's some crossover with the rock stuff and the fantasy stuff, but not as much as you would think. Like I think there's a lot of magic people that would love a magic book,
Mm.
but wouldn't really be that interested in the rock stuff. Not that there aren't some that would be. I definitely would be some. But I think there's a lot of people that are like, well, I just am interested in the magic thing. Why would I buy this 500-page book just to look at this section on the stuff that I really want to see? So I decided I'm going to separate them. I'm going to do another book. It's going to be just the fantasy stuff I've done.
I do understand that, because there is a very distinct and separate fan base for things like Magic the Gathering. I mean, I would know.
Yeah.
For things like Magic the Gathering and for that art that fans specifically would be looking for. So that is actually an excellent point.
So I'm looking forward to that. That's the next book project that I will be doing, which is it's going to be Magic the Gathering. I did some stuff for Chaosium, which is an H.P. Lovecraft game. And then just some paintings that are in that realm. I might do some new versions of those old Magic designs that are like updated versions, and really make it its own thing, catered to that crowd, you know.
Well, glancing back over at these designs next to me and some of your work printing tees with Jim Sorensen here,
Yeah.
there's definitely strong parallels in the artwork. I've got next to me the Renegade card, which, if you look at any of your outlines of people, the facsimile is clearly like Justin Hampton drew this. And then when you look at the flame spirit, you really do see, for me, it's the coloration and the way that you utilize, in the way that a lot of artists, and this is to no shade to any artist, use such a rainbow of colors. I always love it when artists, Jermaine really comes to mind when I think about this, who find a shade and use varying themes of that shade within the print. So the way that you explore, right, everything from orange to red and in between,
Right.
I feel like it is a lot more what I take away from this illustration as it relates to some of your early printing. And we did talk about what some of your printing with Jim was like, but I would love to hear about just a little bit of a recap, I guess, of what that experience was like and how that led you kind of a little bit more into the world of rock and roll iconography.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I go into all the stuff pretty heartily in the book, but it's as a brief overview. So I was doing the comic book stuff, getting into illustration for the Rocket magazine, which is rock and roll art, record reviews, that sort of thing. Also some op-eds and movie reviews, but a lot of pop culture stuff. And then I ended up talking to a friend of mine who I worked with at a coffee shop, which again is the one that Lanigan was dating another barista that was there. It was such a small community. The guy that the guy that was dating her before that, Eric Johnson, he actually was involved with bands. He was the tour manager of Soundgarden back in the day before they blew up. That's how small this community was, right? So it's true. And so I asked Eric, I go, I know you know a lot of people in the local scene. I really want to stop doing this coffee gig and just do art. And he goes, I know a guy. And he goes, I'll talk to him. Give me a number. And he says, yeah, come over to this place. I'll introduce you to Jim Sorensen. And he did all the t-shirts for all the local bands back in the day. So it was Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, Mudhoney, Tad. And then all the like punk bands, like all of the bands, Nirvana.
I gotta shout out my uncle's demo cassette that got them the Lonely Moans, the cassette that got them accepted to Sub Pop right there.
That's right.
One of the few remaining that exists. Shout out to you, Uncle Sam, for writing our theme song. And it like, I have a very, very, very personal connection to this era of music. Yeah, and without diving too deeply into it, being in Seattle, as we've already discussed, is you were in the fabric of it. So what was it that being with Jim brought out that really allowed you to, gave you the focus to where to move forward next?
Well, I mean, Jim was a veteran of the game. I mean, he'd been doing it for, I want to say, since the late 70s. He was probably a good 15 years older than me, and he'd been doing stuff for Green River back when they were going, just, proto punk, maybe even like pre or proto grunge, rather, pre grunge, uh, post punk, And so he'd been doing stuff with all the local bands that were those guys, Metal Church, all of these bands that were before grunge happened. And so, he knew, you know, how to make these bands concepts into T-shirts. And so he recognized me as a budding artist as being someone that not only could be one of his minions, as he called them, to print shirts, but he knew that he could use my talents to help him design stuff for bands. So I showed him some of my rocket stuff, and he was just like, "Okay, yeah, you want to start tomorrow?" It was just very cut and dry, and we got to work. And so he would say, "I'm doing this piece of art. Can you do those separations for it while I work on the next gig? Can you take the orders, answer the phone? Jeff Ament from Pearl Jam is going to come down. Can you talk to him about a gig or, you know, uh, and we would have people that would come in, like Jerry Cantrell from Alice in Chains would come in. He'd be like, I got this new thing I want to do. We're going on tour. And so I got to meet a lot of these guys. I had lunch with Chris Cornell once to talk about a soundgarden design that I was doing. And it wasn't like, I think I touched on this in the book. It wasn't like I was like, oh my God, this is like how it's revered now. Because I had those icons in my head and what that was like with like Led Zeppelin and
Yeah.
Jimmy Page. And those were those guys. These guys were cool and they were doing great stuff, but I didn't think about it in that term yet. You know what I mean? I didn't think about these are generational icons. I was just like, these are cool guys. They're doing cool stuff.
You
And I
know,
like what they're doing and this is fun. But
at the time of this taping, we just lost Ozzy Osbourne,
yeah,
and I it's a really interesting perspective right there, the generational aspect of it,
mhm,
because I remember hearing Dinosaur Jr. for the first time and talking to my uncle about them, and he was like, "Yeah, Jay, like," and I was like, wait a minute, like you're on a first name basis, like these guys, like yeah, like everybody, like so I kind of have had this idea, of kind of what it was like, but my uncle left rather soon, and to hear about this, like it flattens all of my segue questions, because it's really wild that just the scene was that involved, because you're right. Your heroes at that time are the ones who are out
yeah,
there rocking it. And the
yeah,
bands that, I mean, now we think of Alice in Chains, we think of Soundgarden, we think of, like we mentioned before, Queens of the Stone Age. And I mean, like, these are bands that like have stood the test of time, but at the time,
right.
it's an important context to remember.
Mhm. Well, and there was a real sense of community in the sense of like, unlike a lot of other cities like New York or LA, where people were like, adversarial toward other bands or whatnot. The Seattle scene was much more, hey, you're doing cool stuff. We're doing cool stuff. I'll go to your show if you come to my show. And right on. I love that set. There was a lot of people that were just going and you'd see a lot of the same people, even if they were, just other music heads that were, you just get used to seeing them or whatever. But that communal vibe was very strong, so there wasn't this like there's us and them. It was like we're all just kind of supporting each other, so it was a different time for sure. It was really, really cool. It was really fun.
All right, 3, 2. That's all well and good, but I do have to take a moment to say there's That makes sense. As I've been casually for those listeners and readers who are not viewing this on YouTube. First of all, like and subscribe on YouTube. Second of all, there's a series of bands here that are all noteworthy in their own right. But as you've been describing this community, a lot of them have made sense to me. But I see one here in 1995 that really stood out to me as I was reading the book. Another poster I was unaware of. In 1995, you did a poster for Radiohead.
Mm-hmm.
And, okay, Alice in Chains, I understand. Like, Jeff Ament, Pearl Jam, I understand. Soundgarden, everybody's in that area. But, like, Radiohead are not from Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how did that happen?
Well, I mean, it became one of those things where as I started doing local posters and T-shirts and whatnot, I was being seen by promoters that were bringing national acts, and they were like, "Hey, we got this band coming, and we'd really like you to do something for this band." And I'd never heard of Radiohead; I had no idea who they were. I was too broke to have MTV at the time, so I'd never heard Creep. I didn't know that. So this was the album Bins, and I was like, "It sounds cool. I like the name. I'm gonna go check them out." And I really liked the album, and I was like, yeah, I'm down. Let's do this poster. So I did this. This was for a tiny venue in Seattle before they even got an MTV for that album. What was I gonna say? I wouldn't talk about it like it was still happening.
Oh, yes.
Peony.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Got you.
Like so past tense.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
All right. Ready?
Yep.
3, 2. So around that time, the turn of the century, we come upon one of my favorite blips in your illustrious career, Post Neo Explosionism, the group that lasted in the early 2000s with renowned artists Jermaine Rogers and Emek, who we spoke about earlier. And folks, if you want to learn more about Post Neo Explosionism, or PNE as they'll be referred to from now on, go back and listen to our interview from season 1. What I want to talk about is, the three of you being such creative individuals working together during that time period from 2002 to, or early 2002-ish, 2000-ish to like 2005 or 6-ish. Was that about?
No, we did stuff for different bands through 2007, and then we kept doing stuff for Queens all the way. And then we did the 27 Club and the Beatles print all the way in the Hangover print to about 2010 or yeah. So
I can't believe I forgot about the Hangover print. That's actually one that I did want to get to, but the 27 Club being one of them. But first, I just want to ask, when you're working with two folks that, yes, are your friends, but are also extraordinarily creative individuals in their own rights, and talented as well. Is there ever any sort of artistic power struggle or anything like that? Was there any kind of, non-cohesive moments with the group, or was it really like kind of just camaraderie? We're doing this, we're in this.
I mean, there was always, discussions about the project, about what we were going to attempt to do. But when it came to the band stuff, we were mostly like, here's your dates, here's my dates, here's your dates. And then we would just do our thing. We really didn't step on each other's toes, unless it was kind of like, I have this idea, what do you think? Which happened, and we'd get input from, for each of us from, two of the most renowned poster artists in the industry at the time. You know what I mean? So what a cool thing to have, to be able to go, I have this idea, but I don't know if this works. What do you think? That was fun. That was very inspiring to get to hear, a fresh take. But we had that, Jermaine and I, at least before that too, where we would bounce ideas. Hey, I got this project coming up. What do you think of this? You know what I mean? So that was always super fun. Yeah, it was a good camaraderie in that way.
That it does make sense. I would say arguably still highly renowned poster artists, both of them. I have
For sure.
Emick did one of my favorite prints, the Dead Tour print in 2009, which I still have, and Jermaine did the print for the Ghosts of the Forest show that I caught, which was
Right on.
really sweet. And
I mean, they both have so many classic designs.
I
You know,
mean,
it's
yeah.
impressive.
It,
Yeah.
it really is. And I mean, the force of you together, I actually happen to have the handbook from the show,
Oh, cool.
but yeah, it took
That's awesome.
took a while to get
Those are
that.
rare. Yeah, those
Yeah.
are rare.
Yeah. It took a
That's from the
while.
LA show in '03. That's wild.
Oh, 05.
Oh, when you '05, that's right. When you said the early 2000s, it made me think really quickly how my daughter, who's now 15, when she refers to my time in the '90s, she says, "Yeah, back in the late 1900s."
Oh,
And I'm like, "Oh,
I feel
I
personally
didn't
assaulted.
I didn't have a horse and buggy. Do you understand what that sounds like?" But yeah, it's like, oh, dismissed.
In the
Oh,
late
that's harsh.
20th century.
Oh, I know. You have false. I have a. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Kind of stopped
man.
me dead in my tracks. So I just had to laugh. I was like, honey, no, we went in carriages. We went.
It's wild, and it's funny because the show name was Your Kids Belong to Us, and and it's very, I love that name, that the name of that show, because like it's very evocative of the art in different ways, of the art styles of the three of you in your own respective ways. And for you specifically, with that just that punk background, and then the heavy inks and the hard coloring and bold designs, it really is kind of carrying on that punk sentiment, that you were talking about, of like, with comic books growing up, and like them being in this scene that was like coming up with all these folks who are around your age making this music. And it really, I feel like, does translate well. And you mentioned the 27 Club. We talked in our last interview about, who drew what. I'm more curious about in the updated version. Now we included a few people. So we have Amy Winehouse.
Right.
We have
Who
Kurt
sadly
Cobain.
became a new member since the first one.
Yes, absolutely. We have rather, in addition to Jimi Hendrix, Kurt Cobain, and Pig
Jim Morrison.
Jim Morrison. Yes, they included Janis Joplin and Robert Johnson in the back. And who drew those different? I have my guesses. But who drew the additional characters and why?
There were, what was there? Three. There was Pigpen, Amy Winehouse. I think it was just Pigpen and Amy Winehouse. Two at it.
It wasn't Robert Johnson in the back in the first one?
Robert Johnson was in the original.
Excuse me. Yeah.
So it was just the two. But it was, when there's only two, that means only two can do it. So so we had to kind of like draw straws, and I think in the end we decided that Emick had done, so many dead things, and neither one of us had, that made sense for Emick to do Pigpen, And then I don't remember why I got chosen to do Amy, but I was, I was down. So
really, I thought it was the opposite.
Oh, interesting.
I genuinely, I waited to read about it because I wanted to talk about it. I genuinely,
you thought I did Pigpen?
Yeah.
You know what's really funny about that image is I've literally had people go like, "Oh, cool, you guys added Lemmy," and I'm like, you do realize he was like the flipped 27. He was like about 72, 71.
Yeah.
This is people that were 27 when he died. It couldn't be Lemmy, dude. That's hilarious. No, it's not Lemmy. It's
Well, that's
fantastic.
wild because if you would have asked me, before you had said that who drew which person, I would have said you had drawn Pigpen and Emic drew. Yes, that's
Interesting.
really that it is interesting. You did really. It's a great skeleton. I mean, like
Thank you.
it's really it's really well done.
Thank you.
Oh man, wow! Did not see that coming. And then, got to talk a little bit about the Hangover set. I really,
Sure.
I need that print. I don't know if you have any, but I'd
Hmm.
love to get one.
I do.
Um, Again, I was just for our audience. I think this one is worth rehashing. Just the story of how this came to be because it's one of my absolute favorites.
Right on. Yeah, it's funny because I literally got an email in my inbox that said, and The Hangover at this point had been out for, I don't know, maybe a month, maybe not, maybe weeks. And it became the highest grossing rated R comedy of all time at that time. I don't know if that's been broken since or not. I would expect so, but I don't know. So I got an email in my inbox that said, "Hey, this is Todd Phillips. I just did my movie The Hangover, and I've had this idea for a long time of hiring some different poster artists to do versions of my movies. And would you be interested in doing one?" And I read it, and I was like, "Someone's fucking with me. This is someone fucking with me. This is not Todd Phillips. This is." So I wrote back. I go, "If this is really Todd Phillips, of course I would be interested in talking, but how am I supposed to know this is really Todd Phillips? So prove to me that you're Todd Phillips." And he wrote back, "Ha ha 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 ha. This is really Todd Phillips. Do you want to get on a phone call? What do you need to convince you that this
That's
is really?"
authentic as fuck right there. Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh shit, damn! I totally did not." Yeah. Okay. Cool. It's cool. It's cool.
I mean, it's just really awesome that there's all of a sudden this massive tie-in with one of the greatest, in my opinion, one of the greatest comedies of all time, certainly of our generation. I just
Yeah.
love the fact that
That first one is
they're
classic.
just another just another crossover on top of comics and on top of Magic the Gathering, where outside of rock poster art, our paths have crossed as from, fan to artist. And one of the things that, you know, there have been a few people who have hit me up to be on the show in a similar fashion, actually. And that's kind of how you know it's authentic, is when it's like that bare bones, like, like, oh yeah,
Right.
no,
Right.
no, right. Um, and, I'm never any less grateful for whoever is on the show, whether they reach out or I reach out to them. Just like the sheer fact of the matter that like folks would take time is I never take that for granted. And it's just really cool for me to, like, as we go through this, to find all of these intersections, uh with my own personal history outside of live music. It's awesome.
Right. Thanks. It's fun.
And we could spend hours talking, but we have limited time available. We talked about the Danger Mouse cover in our previous interview, and folks, the reason why I'm skipping over a lot of this stuff is because we've addressed so much of it. One thing
Sure.
I do have to say though, and what ties each little piece together, Justin, I mentioned this to you in conversation, but your writing is outstanding.
Thanks, man.
I
Appreciate it.
really, I really can't emphasize enough to our readers, listeners, and viewers. This is a true book. Like, this is not just a collection of posters or of photos or of illustrations. Like, there is consistent, fantastic prose throughout this book that really weaves and ties the history of this together. And, we are glossing over quite a little bit of it just for the sake of time, but it really, reading this book was a real treat for me, like, because
Awesome.
I love books,
I
and
appreciate
it really exceeded my expectations as far as like what to expect from a narrative perspective. I really like I feel
that's
like I
pretty
really
cool.
got an insight into, you know, even after having talked to you, an even deeper insight, into your career. I think the
That's
next
awesome.
area, I mean, listen, it's true, I mean, it's a matter of fact that reading through this book, like I was reading it, and I had a friend over, and we were arguing back and forth over it because we wanted to. He's only in town for a limited amount of time, and he wanted to read as much of it as I was like, I'll send you the PDF. Like,
Right on.
um, so now arguably we come to, and I am biased, but my favorite section of the book, which is your Ween posters.
Nice.
Hail Boognish. Now first, now this print right here, I mean, clearly inspiration for the cover of Visual Feast.
Right.
And I remember going to see them at the Aragon Theater in Chicago in March several years ago, and
Cool.
featured a couple familiar characters
Very true.
that I recognized, and I love the idea of having worked with a band so consistently to develop this kind of thematic approach. And I'd love to hear about how your relationship with Ween has been over the years, up and,
Cool.
starting out, getting to meet them, and what
Yeah.
working with them was like. You wrote, and I just want to quote this real quick. These guys make it easy and fun to do my job every single time.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, there's certain bands that they really want to have, and I don't necessarily pin this on the band. Sometimes it's management, sometimes it's the merchandise company, sometimes it's a lot of factors outside of the band, you know. And then there's other times, where you just have complete freedom to do whatever you want to do, and there's a trust that's there, and that's the way it was with Ween for sure. That's the way it was with Queens of the Stone Age. That's the way it was with Mark Lanigan, where you just do what you do. And we love your work, we trust you, and we can't wait to see what comes to the merch table. You know what I mean? Ween was definitely one of those bands. And an absolute pleasure. Just they're so their own thing. And so like out there, and they just do whatever they feel like doing, and genre flipping, and homages abound, to different
You
eras
know,
of music.
one of my favorite Ween posters also comes, from Jermaine, the Mr. Can you please help my horny my pony
Well,
print
that's one of my favorites too, totally.
from like
And it's just the
94.
snot nosed horse
Yeah,
with
yeah,
the
and the guy
thick and
is like little
yeah,
alien boy bobblehead. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mr. Can you please help my
so,
pony?
so good.
But some of yours, now I'm looking at, I've got the La Cucaracha print in front of me, but more importantly, the Al Capone mugshot, the aliens guy,
Ancient aliens.
and the Kennedy handing the
Right,
cigar to Marilyn Monroe,
right,
the Boognish handing the cigar to Marilyn Monroe and Kennedy. These are prints that are iconic in Ween history, like from as a
right.
print collector. Like
Cool.
these are just iconic prints.
Thanks, man.
And I gotta ask, like, what was it like working with the band? Because I mean, working with them for that long, you must have had some interaction with them on
Hmm.
some level.
Yeah, the first gig I did for them was the '04, and I did the Buenos Tardes Amigo theme. And that was really fun because that one especially got me because my brother and I watched, which is hilarious. My brother, um, and we uh, we watched all the Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns as kids, and so that had that whole vibe of everything's hot, everyone's kind of greasy and sweaty and dirty, and uh, shit's about to go down at any second. Someone's gonna get shot, or whatever. And so when I heard that song, it just sounded like one of those movies. It sounded perfectly like that soundtrack that you always hear, in the song or in the movie. So I pictured it as soon as I heard that song, and I was just like, "Oh my god, this would be such a fun one to do a poster for." And so that was my first choice. It was very obvious. And the actual original on that one, because I wanted to capture that grittiness, the original drawing is maybe like that big. I mean, it's teeny tiny. In my sketchbook, I just did it freehand with a dry brush. I didn't even draw it in pencil first. I just did it freehand. And I just loved the way it looked. And when I scanned it to blow it up to do a refined version, I was like, wow, it's perfect just the way it is. It's just
I
raw.
never would have imagined, and that's not. We're on page 349 if you're keeping score at home. That detail is not in here, and I never would have guessed that if you wouldn't have just told me that it was that small
Yep.
and blown up to be this, because this is, I mean, the full poster it says here was 17 by 31. And that's wild to think that that was blown up from an image that was like 2 by 4.
I've got the image on my wall right in front of me, framed. Yeah,
Oh,
because I
that's
love the
amazing.
poster so much. Because when you do something that's that small, instead of like long brush strokes or however most people work, when you do something that small and it's that expressive with a dry brush, everything's just in the wrist. So it's super expressive. You know what I mean? So I've done a few posters like that where I've done it really, really small like that, and it always turns out cool. It's not something that works for every show. I mean, obviously, I've gotten known for doing this pretty slick style that's very detailed, and but I love doing those ones that are super quick and expressive. Yeah.
Well, I think the rougher element definitely shows with the Capone profile as well. Like that's definitely real, real brown.
Mhm.
Talk about shades of brown. Yeah.
The really fun thing about that one was I was talking to the management, and they said that they really loved the idea that the Aragon supposedly had a connecting tunnel to another building, and they used that during Prohibition. Al
Yep.
Capone used it during
True facts.
Prohibition.
True
Yeah, yeah.
facts.
And so I was like, that's genius. So immediately I pictured the Boognish as Al Capone. And so it's a cigar and it's like a mug shot.
Fucking iconic.
I think so. It was fun. I
Fucking
was like,
iconic.
I hope people get this. I hope people get that this is supposed to be the Boognish and Capone.
And then and you had no way of knowing that you would have bookended their final shows and their reunion in such an interesting way. I mean, so again, the Ancient Aliens print being the print for what wound up being their final run for a period of time.
I think it was
One of the
one of
most,
three, of that series. Yeah.
I mean,
Because it was
it's
three shows in a row, and I did one of the posters for that last. Yeah.
one of the most iconic prints, in my opinion. One of the ones. I mean, obviously the timing and everything bears significance upon it, but just it's so funny.
Thanks.
It's so fucking funny.
The
Like,
funny thing about that is I had the idea a good year before I got contacted. And it was specifically a Ween idea because I've been watching Ancient Aliens, and I love the show, and I love the fact that
there's a picture with him with the print. I love it. It's amazing that he's that yeah.
He loved it. He loved it. Giorgio Tsoukalos.
Mm-hmm.
The dude with the big hair, as everyone else refers to him. So he was really cool about it. He saw it and posted on Twitter back when it was still Twitter. Oh my God, Justin Hampton made me famous. And I remember thinking, dude, you're on TV. You're already famous. That's
That's wild.
But we actually emailed each other. We contacted each other, and he was like, dude, I love it so much. It's so great. But the idea had come when I was just like, because I knew that the lore of the Boognish was this ancient, character It was supposed to have been around for millennia or whatever. And I was watching Ancient Aliens, and they keep talking about all this stuff from millennia ago and ancient artifacts. And I was like, what if the Bugnish was on hieroglyphics? What if he was in and so I'm going to just add him to all these things, and then I'm going to have Giorgio Tsoukalos going, this is obviously, and I said it like he said it because he's got an interesting accent. He says extraterrestrials, and so I spelled it that way. It must obviously be extraterrestrials, and he thought that was really funny. He had a great sense of humor that he was in on the joke, you know. So I had a friend that went to one of the alien conventions, and she told me she was going to go, and she was like, I can get one signed maybe if you send me one. So I got one signed to me from him, and I got two different copies signed to Gene and Dean that I sent those guys from Giorgio Tsoukalos.
That's fucking incredible, man.
What a blast! I mean, I literally when they were like, "Hey, we have a gig," management reached out. I go, "I'm so glad you reached out because I've had this idea I've been sitting on for like a year." And they're like, "What is it?" And I told them, they're like, "Oh my god, that's hilarious."
And then fast forward a few years to when the band gets back together, and you have your reunion posters, the iconic George Washington and the tree, Shaken with Lincoln, and then the most iconic, I think, of all,
which is a collab with Jermaine Rogers.
Which I was about to say I did not know.
Okay.
How did...
I mean, we've done a bunch of collaboration, not only the P&E stuff, but there's been different posters where I've, you know, hey, we should do something. What do you think? Are you down to get time? Whatever. And I told him the idea of making it so the Bugnish was this, again, historical figure, like in the Ancient Aliens one, that had been
right,
kind of a dial pusher throughout history of mankind. And so what if he influenced each of these presidents in a different way? So in the George Washington one, he's urging young George Washington into a state of rebellion to cut down the cherry tree. And I put in the wording below, sowed the seeds for his rebellion, which would be against the British Empire. And then the George Washington one, if he was an ally, like some great general that joined Abraham Lincoln.
With you on our side, good sir, there's no way we can lose.
Exactly. And then on the last one to have, me and Jermaine talked about it, and he was like, oh, you know, it's got to be Marilyn Monroe.
We had.
Yeah, I was like, yes, of course it does. And JFK. Yeah. And then the quote, we had a great time at your party.
We had the best time at your party.
We had the best time at your party. Yeah.
It's the perfect quote. Like, it matches the theme, like flowing from President's Day to Valentine's Day, and then like the theme, the JFK Monroe hint, and then also acknowledging the final night of the run. We had the best time at your party, which I think is what makes it. Like, there's so many things that make it the perfect final print.
Well, the really wild thing about that one is rare. President's Day and Valentine's Day are usually really close together, but President's Day is usually the weekend. And for Valentine's Day to be the third date right after, it doesn't happen like that all the time.
No.
Yeah. So it just coincided. There was President's Day, and then President's Day theme continuing to the weekend, and then ending on Valentine's Day with the President's Day theme still going, but with the love thing added. So it was, this weird confluence of like, it just was perfect. It was too cool.
Yeah. It's the only way. We had the best time at your party.
Very honored to be chosen as the artist for the weekend, because they could have had 3 different artists do it. They could have had an abundance of other artists just in general do it, but they asked me to do all 3. And that's part of why I asked Jermaine too, was I was like, you know what? There's been a lot of artists that have done stuff significantly over the years. And I think Jermaine went back to the late 90s with them. So it made sense to ask him, you know, to add that flavor of like another artist in there. You know what I mean? It just made sense. And I knew the fans would dig that because he's done a lot of really significant lead posters as well.
I mean, I already mentioned the one, but I mean, I could go on with a whole bunch of others. And then wrapping up the Ween segment, you did create a print for a show that didn't happen on the Ill-Fated Chocolate and Cheese tour. You know, we don't need to get too far into it, but I just want to ask on the print, what was it like to be asked to do one of the prints for the 30th anniversary of
Oh,
the album?
awesome. I was hoping I would get reached out to, and I did. And the really kind of weird and cool thing and serendipitous, just strangeness that just fits so well with the band is even though the tour was canceled, even though that date didn't happen, and I did this poster for the thing, this kind of weird and awesome thing did happen in that the show was going to be in Eugene. I did the poster for the show. They were sitting at the printers, and I'm like, oh my God, what's going to happen with these posters? I hope they let me sell them, even though the show got canceled. And then a buddy of mine who's a big wiener, as they call him, Ween fan, he said that he'd heard word that the local Ween tribute band, uh, I don't want to fuck up their name. I want to say it's Brown Stallion. I think it is Brown Stallion. Um, they were a Eugene and Portland band, but they had been offered to play the same venue on the same date that Ween had canceled.
Oh, wow.
It's like all these people are going to be coming that could either get their money back or they could see this really revered local Ween tribute band that people really like that because they're really good. And my friend was like, dude, you should go down to that show with me and you should set up and sell your posters. And I was like, that sounds kind of weird and fun. And I actually reached out to Ween's management and I was like, what do you think we sold these posters at the Ween tribute band show? How Ween is that? And she was like, oh my God, that's so weird. That's so
The
good.
brownest thing ever.
That's the brownest thing I've ever heard of. And she was like, you know, I would be too hard. It's too tense a moment to pitch that to the guys. So I can't say yes, even though I'd love to say yes to that. She's like, I just got to pass. I'm sorry. That's such a great idea. It's so fun, so funny. But she's like, I just, there's no way I could get that approved in time. And it's just too sensitive right now. And so I'm going to have to pass, but you gave me a really good giggle and thank you for that. And I will let you know. I'm sure we're going to be able to have you sell the posters. Just let me get back to you. So I went to the show. I sold the post, just random Ween posters at the show. Did very well. The band sounded amazing. They played probably, a half full venue that would have been packed and sold out. But the people that came, all the Ween heads that heard this was going to happen, they didn't care. They wanted to hear Ween. They wanted to party and dance with their friends. And the show happened. And for everyone that came up to talk to me at the booth, I showed them a little preview on my phone of what the poster was going to be. And they were all like, oh my God, how can I buy this? I'm like, stay tuned to my website. I'm sure it's going to happen. Just sign up on my mailing list so you get the announcement when it happens. And people were like, can I show my friend? Can I take a screen? And I'm like, no. No screenshots. Just put this in your memory, in your brain, and come back to the website when they go up for sale. They will. I'm sure of it. And sure enough, they approved it, and they did a few weeks later. So
Yeah.
it was fun, but how wacky is that?
That is insane.
The same venue, the same night they were supposed to play.
That's the wildest, brownest story I've ever heard involving a poster in my life, and that's
Very
99 episodes in. I fucking love it.
Too fun.
Too much fun.
And I had a great time at their party.
So, getting towards the end of the book, we touch back on Mark Lanigan, and it would be facetious of me. I mean, just looking at the date and breadth, and we did talk a lot about these images, especially the iconic Black Plague tour poster, the carrion guy wheeling through the death cart,
the plague doctor. Yep.
The plague reminded me at the time, I think, the Monty Python, "Bring out your dead."
Totally.
Right. What you talked earlier in the interview about your relationship with Mark, and just flipping through these pages and seeing not just the pictures of you and him together, but having read the words that you had to write about your relationship with him and seeing just the scope of art attributed to his projects, because really wildly different designs
Mhm.
across the years, and even within the same year sometimes for different shows or projects. And talk just a little bit more about like what it was like, not just the friendship with Mark, but imbuing that artistic creativity into music and friendship that meant so much to you.
Right. Well, I mean, like I said, I had known of Mark's work years and years before actually working with him, and so by the time that did come together, it was just such a joy because his work already meant so much to me, and his lyrics were so powerful, that it made it really easy to jump in visually with, I could choose any song off an album and just be, you know, off to the races because it was so fun. But the really neat thing is Mark trusted me to the tune of he would send me a preview of the album months before it was released. And I would just get a listen to this brand new phenomenal album and just kind of absorb it for a while before I even started my process. And then we'd talk on the phone and we'd have like a good hour or so long conversation. And, we talk about the album, but then we just get sidetracked and talk about, what it was like to be a creative back in the day, what it's like to be now, the never ending hustle of trying to stay relevant, and, um, how much of an actual massive effort is on the side that people don't see, of making stuff work and making stuff uh, be true to who you are. And we had some really awesome, pretty deep conversations about that stuff. And we both, it's funny because he would say, he go, yeah, man, we're lifers in the game. Because it was true, because we both had, our struggles, our ups and downs, and, knew what it meant, not just on the surface of what people see, but everything that happens to you personally, in your life, trying to be a creative that stays, you know, busy and semi-successful, or, whatever. And the ups and downs. I mean, he told me a lot of, real shit where you're just like, moments he thought about quitting because he was just like, hey, I don't know, just doesn't seem to be clicking. People just don't buy my work that much or whatever. I mean, he's had multiple moments like that, and I think anyone who's a real creative that stays true to themselves has those moments where you're like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this to myself? You know what I mean? This is hard. This is not an easy thing to do. People just see, the poster that comes out or hear the album that comes out. They don't think about everything that happened to make that happen. You know what I mean? And it's not just the immediate sense, it's like the years of experiences to get you to the point where your craft has gotten to where you're happy with it. You know what I mean? There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that goes into it. So we had really cool conversations about this stuff, like really deep, awesome conversations. And and it made what I put out for him all the more gratifying when he would send me a text and be like, dude, that's so fucking sick. How cool is that to hear that from someone that you really respected and had this, kind of confidence with uh, him telling me stuff that, wasn't necessarily meant for other ears or would never be shared with other ears. You know what I mean? Specific stuff, horror stories. You know what I mean? Like, and so it was just a really cool, like, kind of brotherhood. It was almost like an older brother. You know what I mean? It was awesome. It was really, really fun. And, it had its ups and downs. Mark had a definitely abrasive side to him. He could get pretty bullheaded at times and get kind of upset. But and I mean, like, once or twice the entire time I knew him. You know what I mean? But and I've got some funny stories that I don't mind sharing. There are moments like that. One of which I'll tell you because it's a funny story. Um, there was a show that he was playing at the Neptune in Seattle, and I was driving the posters up to the show. So he didn't ask me to drive. He was just like, send the posters to the show or whatever. But I'm like, I want to go. I want to Seattle. It's only 2.5 hours away, at least the way I drive. And and I was like, I'll just deliver in person. I'll come see the show. I'll come see you. I'll come hang out. He's like, okay, cool. That sounds great. So anyway, since I left Seattle, it's gotten more dense. It's got more populated. Traffic is a lot worse. So I'd given myself plenty of time, but traffic was particularly bad. So as I'm pulling into the venue, the doors are supposed to open at like 6, show at 7. I'm pulling up at like 6 o'clock. And it's been like a long time sitting in traffic slowly. I finally got there. And so I get this text, and this this is Mark going like, dude, what the fuck? It's 6 o'clock. The doors just open. You're supposed to be here with the posters. Dude, you totally fucking screwed me, man. What the fuck, dude? And so I get the text as I'm like getting out of my car, posters in my arm. And I walk in, and they're like, yeah, backstage is this way. Go this way. Come up this way. Someone will take you. And I walk in, and Mark turns around from backstage, and he's like, dude, I felt so bad as soon as I said that. I'm so sorry I said that. I just, as soon as I said that, I felt fucking horrible. And I go, yeah, fucker.
Good, right?
And he looks at me, and he's like, and we both just started fucking laughing like crazy. You know what I mean? Because he knew he said it as I arrived. It was just the timing was too goddamn funny. It wasn't like I was like half an hour late or an hour late. I literally was at the door. And then, we gave each other a big hug, and we sat down and laughed for a bit. And I've got a photo that's in the book, I think, from that particular moment. But he had this gruff way about him, but especially if he knew he was in the wrong, or if you gave him shit back about it, he would always laugh. He like loved that, like almost like brotherly fuck with you. You fuck with him back. Just such a great dude, such a great, funny fucking guy, But he had his side, you know what I mean?
Speaking about that, kind of that discussion about how the sausage is made, and like and having those tough conversations, and really being able to flesh out those ideas and talk about the art. You have this whole section towards the end of the book. Of photos, of stories, of unused poster designs, of all of these things that went into the Kickstarter. And I hearing you talk about, your relationship with Mark, it really sounds like that's a natural flow to the end of the book, is to really kind of put out there in print what went into or at least some semblance of it, of an idea of what went into making this tome that is I gotta say, folks, a force to be reckoned with.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Well, one of the things that, as a lot of the people that backed the thing know, it took a lot longer than it was supposed to, or maybe I bit off more than I could chew initially. You know what I mean? It was a very ambitious project, and I wanted to make it something that was not only for my legacy, but something that people would really love, in the sense of it being a high production value, the sense of it being printed very well, being very well designed and very well written. So I can't even tell you how many hours, writing, rewriting, designing, redesigning, tweaking things. And the beautiful thing about what some of that stuff actually allowed was being able to go back, not only early on and catch stuff that I was designing not as well in the beginning and fix those things, but, I was able to. The sad part, obviously, is that Mark passed away. You know what I mean? It breaks my heart that he didn't get to see the final version. He did see a PDF of maybe 350 pages of it, an earlier version, and he loved it. And he'd been encouraged by Anthony Bourdain to write his book. And so Mark then encouraged me to write my book, which is so fucking cool. Talk about lineage. That's amazing.
Wow.
Both tragic what happened to both of them. But the the little weird grace, the silver lining, if you will, was my book took longer. And so I was able to say words about Mark, not just as a person I worked with, but to change the intro of that section about Mark and talk about more, talk about as a, posthumous thing now, you know. So I was able to talk about some other things in the beginning of that section as the fact that he had passed. Had it been published earlier, I wouldn't have had that moment to have and talk about him in that way, not only with great reverence of in the now, but in great reverence of, now he's gone, you know. And I'm glad that part got to be added because I was able to go and find some older texts of his and emails and add a couple things that he had said to me personally that I wouldn't have thought to add before. You know what I mean? But so yeah, so that's one little thing that I'm glad I got to be able to add that I wouldn't have otherwise. Obviously, it's heartbreaking that he's gone, but I was able to say, in perspective of him passing. You know what I mean? Um, and then other things, with the Kickstarter itself. I mean, yeah, I was able to add a lot of stuff that was, uh, photos from the past, cool moments I've had in my career, meeting certain people that were supportive and cool. Uh, met Helen Mirren backstage at a Queen show. She was super cool. She kissed me on the cheek. She was super cool. So that's the little snippet, the little story is told in the book. And then I added everyone that got the very deluxe version had a sketch in it. There was like 50 copies on a silver slipcase. Everyone got their names in the indicia. So that was that sense of community, that sense of people that believed in the project and backed it. And I included the free print that the first 100 buyers got, the PJ Love print, which was a addendum to the PJ20 poster that was something for the Kickstarter people. The cool Jam Nirvana piece that Charles Peterson and I did, merging his photo and my original flyer together for something that was very cool. I think the thing that a lot of people are really going to get out of this is it's a very personal tale. It's a very intimate tale. Um, it's a mild autobio along with all this art. You know what I mean? I wanted it to be more than just a picture book. I wanted to tell my story and let people glimpse the inside of what it was like to do these projects and to work with these people. And I think, for the most part, I accomplished that. I'm very, very, very proud of what it turned out to be. It was a lot of work. When the Kickstarter happened, it became a lot of pressure to deliver, But I just kept telling people, trust me, it's going to be worth it. It's going to be something that you're going to want to hold, in great regard in your collection. So that's my intent, is I want that to be that for you. And it will be. Trust me, it's coming. So it's been cool
Well,
to get people's feedback now. Finally, people going like, oh my God, I've gotten so many beautiful emails.
I was gonna say, and I'm so glad I get to say it to you directly as a backer of that Kickstarter.
True.
You over delivered. I
Thanks, man.
mean, this book, I cannot overstate how much fun it has been to read through. And folks, I could spend hours on any given chapter at any given point in time, and we could make this conversation go on for hours. But I think really, Justin, a lot of what you just said is really summed up by a few words here on one of the opening pages by our friend Jermaine, who says this about you and your art. Like the rock and roll which provided him the fuel that launched his journey, Hampton's artwork is restless. New times call for new visions, and the images keep coming. His visual universe keeps twisting and turning, mutating into fantastic new things that are somehow still familiar. It's fascinating to watch. There's something special there on that paper. Trust your eyes. They know.
So awesome.
And
He's such a good friend, and he's such a fucking poet. That guy. He's a great
he,
writer.
he he is, and it really is true though. Like, it is a visual feast, folks. Trust your eyes. Like
I
like
love
like
seeing
German.
all your note tabs. That's awesome.
Listen, I did I did my homework, and
Awesome.
I gotta say, not just the whole concept of having you on the show at the time. My whole thought process was, this is an artist that I'm a huge fan of, have been for a while. He's putting out his book. I love books. He's doing a Kickstarter. The timing coincides. Why not promote the Kickstarter and have him on? And it gives
Totally.
me a great opportunity to talk to someone who I'm a huge fan of. And to be here now, 2 years later, with the
Full
book
circle.
and
Yeah.
episode 99,
That's crazy.
is just from season 1 to the end of season 5. It just blows my mind, and it's
Awesome.
such an amazing thing. And I just wanted to thank you again so much
Absolutely.
for being back on the show.
I appreciate it, man. And I want to say kudos to you because I remember when you were first starting out and what you're looking to accomplish. And I have watched you over the years and I'm impressed, man. Kudos. Seriously, you've done an excellent job. So to be here on the 99th episode now and to see how you progressed and your creativity is now flowing with all of these awesome creatives that you're talking to, it's awesome. So nicely done, man. Bravo.
Well, thank you. Thank you very
Absolutely.
much. Thank you very much. It really, if you're not watching on YouTube, I have this really big shit eating grin on my face that I'm trying to get rid of, but that really means a lot. And,
Right on.
folks, that's a wrap for season 5 of Secondhand Talent. Thanks to Luke Chu. Thanks to Tenacious Toys. Thanks to Justin Hampton and to all of the guests. And most importantly, thanks to Steiner, thanks to Mario, and thanks to all of you for listening, reading, watching, wherever you are. We love you, and we will see you next year for our 100th episode. This is Steiner with another episode of Secondhand Talent, and we'll see you in 2026. That's a podcast. There we go.
Nicely done, man. Nicely
All right,
done.
let's just